Welcome to Memento Argentum, where remembering the silver screen is a requirement, not a request. I am your host, E. Lynn, and allow me to tell you a creepy tale. A gentleman and his wife and daughter are going on a trip, and their car breaks down on a snowy, mountainous roadway. Luckily, there is a phone booth nearby, so the gentleman goes to use it while his family play in the snow on the side of the road behind their car. A semi barrels down the road and goes out of control, and he watches, trapped in the phone booth a good distance away, as the truck plows into the car and through his wife and daughter. Months pass, and he is still mourning. However, he is a music professor and artist, so a friend suggests he move to his city, Seattle, and lecture at the college there. He agrees and applies to rent a house while living there so he doesn't have to worry about bothering anyone while he works on his music. A lady with the Historical Society helps him find an older house verging on mansion that hadn't been rented in a long time, but was perfect for him, as it had plenty of room for all of his things and even had a music room with a grand piano. He moves in, and the first morning in is awakened by a loud pounding sound echoing throughout the house, seemingly from nowhere. He looks into it and even has the caretaker for the property check the house. And the caretaker blames water pipes and age for the noise, although the main character is dubious of this thanks to how rhythmic the pounding is, and for the length of time it goes on for. After teaching a class at his home one night, he finds that there is the sound of running water coming from somewhere in the house. Following the sound leads him further and further up the floors until he reaches the third and final floor. He finds a bathroom with a faucet on, and there he sees something that he cannot explain. In the morning, he goes to research the house with the Historical Society. What he finds out as he continues to search for an answer to this mystery, these weird noises, these strange occurrences, and what happens during are so much more than anyone could have expected. And all he can hope to do now is survive. The Changeling was made in 1980, and it stars George C. Scott as Mr. John Russell, Trish Van Devere as Miss Clara Norman, and Melvin Douglas as Senator Carmichael. It is rated R. I will be mentioning when something has been genuinely rated, what the rating system is, that way you're aware of it. I feel like that's should be a given, but hey. And now's the time in the review where I have something to confess. This movie, this one right here, is the main reason that I started this channel. I knew I was going to review it because the main reason that I started this channel was I watch a lot of reviewers. I love watching reviewers of movies, TV shows, video games, kids animation, books. I don't care what it is, I will watch it. It is so much fun to watch. But when I watch horror enthusiasts talking about all these films that spooked them out so much, and I see this on their shelf, no review made of it, but it's sitting there on their shelf in the background of whatever they're saying, and they never once reference this movie, I can't help but wonder why. It is such a good movie. I mean, clearly there it is, otherwise so many people wouldn't own it. And I consider it one of the best of all time haunted house movies. Like, you want a haunted house movie? You're in the mood for spook, you're in the mood for atmosphere and suspense. Put this on, turn off the lights, and turn up the sound. It will spook you every time unless you, for some strange reason, decide to try and look into the stupidity of certain things. It will spook you unless you don't let it. And what's the point in seeing a horror movie if you're not going to let it spook you? one of the other things I have to talk about. Let's go down the list. So the soundtrack for this movie is beautiful. John Russell is a pianist. So the main song for the movie, the main theme, is a piano basically solo. And it's gorgeous and it sounds almost like a music box, which makes perfect sense because there is a music box in the film, and that song comes in more than a couple of times over the course of the film. And it's totally worth it to have that soundtrack. It's such a haunting sound, but it's not outwardly like shrieking violins or anything like that. It's subtle and soft, and it kind of lulls you into that sense of security until you aren't anymore. The setting for this is mostly in the house that he ends up renting, and that thing is gorgeous. I wasn't kidding when I said 3 stories. It is 3 stories plus attic rooms. And obviously there's basement too. And of course, I'm referring to 3 stories by American standards. I believe certain places overseas have different definitions of stories, but it's 3 stories tall. It's basically a mansion. There are gorgeous walls. The library he has these gorgeous bookshelves with this little staircase that has this lattice work on the railing. Like, it's such a beautiful setting. And it adds to the haunting feeling when you're looking at all this stuff that just screams, I'm older than 50 years. Duh. Moving on to the actors, and I suppose I could segue this by saying the house did a great job for what it was there for. I'm not sure how much of it was an actual set and how much of it was a real house. But if they blended the two, or if they only had one, either way, it was amazingly well done. The actors, I mean, George C. Scott it's George C. Scott. He's an amazing actor. He does a great job. And his real life wife, Trish Van Devere, was playing almost a romantic interest, but it's more like a friendship. But you can feel that chemistry between them, like, already. Once they kind of meet, you see them kind of getting along. And that ease of friendship really works for the film. Melvin Douglas does a very good job as Senator Carmichael. He has that sort of senator vibe. I'm not sure how else to describe it. The directing is really solid. The director knows what to show and what not to. He really apparently knew exactly how to work with what he had, because the special effects that they use are sound related. They're not visual, like, there are some visuals, but they're visuals that are easily done. Even in the 80s, that was super easily done. And the sound, not the soundtrack itself, but the background noises and the ambiance that is set by the noises that the house makes and what's going on inside the house is what sets some of the shots up, because you can tell something is going wrong by a noise that you're hearing, and you can tell that it's coming from that direction, or you can tell that it's coming from that direction. Like, it's this sort of claustrophobic feeling, even with a house with like 10-foot ceilings, like, big house. The story itself, it held up very well for me, but I could also be biased because it is one of my favorite haunted house films. The funny thing to me is every time I rewatch it, I am reminded that there have been a couple of films that have curbed some of the shots from this film, and there's no other way to put it, because this one came out well before a few movies that had similar shots in it. And I can only assume that the creators of those films, and I'm trying to keep it vague because it actually does give away a plot point to reference at least one of the shots in particular, so I'm not going to. but they are horror films. The other ones that I'm referencing are horror films, and they are newer. One came out in the early 2000s. I will give you that. But they curbed shots from this movie. It's either that or somehow it jumped across oceans in order to strike someone else as a good idea too while they were making this movie, and it just took them a little bit longer to get it made. Like, I can't explain any other way because there's too many moments where it's like, wait a minute, I've seen that exact setup, that exact shot before. What in the world? Like, it's too similar to be a coincidence. The story itself, I feel, holds up very well, especially if you are coming at it as a period piece where it's taking place in 1980 and it's talking about previous events in the house. It makes perfect sense in that context. Anyone who says that it doesn't make sense now, well, of course it doesn't make sense now. There's a phone booth. There are no phone booths anymore. Everyone's got a cell phone. But if you can take it as a period piece, I feel like it still stands the test of time. It is still one of the scariest haunted house movies I've ever seen. There have been other good ones. It's just this one is probably the best in my opinion, only because it got everything right. And it used an old man as the main character because I'm sorry, George C. Scott was in his 50s when he made this. It's an elderly gentleman was the main character for this movie in a time period when slasher films were a thing. That's the kind of movie this is. So in my opinion, holds up great, totally worth seeing. Again, I'll say this at the end of every video. If you think of a request, I do have a backlog at this point. I've got 2 more that I'm going to have to do within the next few days. And then I've got a backlog of like another 5. So I have a backlog of movies. I will be trying to get through them over the next like 3 weeks. I will be trying to get those taken care of. But if you have any suggestions for movies, I will be more than happy to take them, especially if I can get a hold of them. So go ahead and leave a comment down below. If you liked this video, go ahead and like it. I'm going to start doing this because why not? If you want to see more, go ahead and subscribe. And finally, join me next time when I review Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds. Until then, adieu.